because they wanted culpable deniability. If it didn't work, they wanted to be able to say, I never believed in it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's the industry, man. Success has many parents, and failure is an orphan. He really wanted to be on Geffen for a reason.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't think you're hearing me correctly. I'm not asking you to go on this label. I'm telling you that I'm putting you on this label, and I just poached the best radio guys from every label in the country.
Oh, wow.
To staff this. My name is on it. I'm all about
His
ego.
full name.
He said, I'm in the David Geffen business. I will not allow this to fail. You want to be there. Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said, well, I'm doing great. Today we're gonna have a blast. Now, if you remember about a month and a half ago, we met up with my friend Gunnar Nelson, and 200,000 views later, you guys have asked for him to come back on and talk some more. That was a great time of interviewing and talking to him, and he so graciously was willing to let me do it again. So today we're going over to Gunnar's house, and I'm gonna pick up where we left off. Daze with Jordan the Lion. It begins right now.
All right, Gunnar, great to see you again. So nice of you to come back. Everyone loved your interview with me on, the house that you live in, your dad's history, your history. They all wanted you back. So it was cool that you were like, yeah, come on over, let's do this.
So I can relax now, right?
So yeah, so we talked a lot about your family history. One of the things that people had asked about was your grandparents and your father, were they supportive of you and Matthew playing music, being in the business of Hollywood the way they were?
Well, Grandpa passed away when we were 7 years old. Matt and I started playing music when we were 6. So obviously that last year for Grandpa Ozzy was an uncomfortable one for him. So I don't think he was really in the know that we actually really wanted to make music at that point. We were just a couple of towhead kids, visiting him a couple times a year and all that kind of stuff. But Grandma Harriet was very much involved in the whole process. Pop passed away on New Year's Eve 1986, or actually 85 going into 86. I don't know what to call that. New Year's Eve, was that 85 or is that 86?
Yeah, I think it's technically 85, yeah.
Anyways, but after he passed, he was very supportive in the sense that when he realized we were going to do this for real, he said, always keep your sense of humor, be undeniably good, and the whole thing, and be songwriters. So that actually really helped out a lot. When other kids were in their junior high and high school bands, they were doing cover songs and stuff, and Matt and I were writing our own tunes that, from playing the club scene and stuff, started to get stronger. And that was really the focus of what we were doing. We had the benefit of having our dad put the Stone Canyon Band together around us when we were kids. So he always had a guitar in his hand. He was always writing. He had the band over, really in our room. He pushed our beds out of the way and rehearsed the band, in our room up there in the Hollywood Hills. So he was very supportive about that too. Of course, he passed when we were 18, and you never got to see the Nelson success. He saw the club band that we were in beforehand, which was called the Strange Agents, which was a lot of fun. But he never got to see us play, let's say, at the Universal Amphitheater, which was the last place I saw Pop play.
Okay.
About a month before he passed away, he did a double bill with Fats Domino.
Oh, wow.
And it's so cool for me, because that was really my real hometown victory dance, was playing at the Universal Amphitheater. I remember seeing Linda Ronstadt when I was 7 years old at that venue, when it was still really an amphitheater. It had no roof on it. It was looking over the San Fernando Valley. It was gorgeous. And I made that connection when I was around 7 or 8. Man, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And then saw my dad for the last time performing a month before he died there with Fats Domino. And then Matt and I were lucky enough to sell that out in a few minutes when we came back around with Nelson 4 or 5 years later.
That's really cool. The reason that I kind of asked about were they supportive of you being in the business was because some people had asked, they said, we all hear about this dark side of Hollywood, or this almost like this this cult that you have to be a part of to have any success. Like, did you ever have the situation where that was presented to you or to them? Did you ever hear stories of like you had to almost make a deal with the devil to have success?
Well, I always wondered why Oz really circled the wagons. They had a very insular sort of scene that they did. I mean, he hired his own people who were very loyal. I mean, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet filmed for 14 and a half years or so. And everybody that worked for Grandpa Ozzie, they were incredibly loyal to him because they knew he was loyal to them. He looked at them like family. And the set was closed to industry people. Like if you were an agent or you worked for the network or whatever, you weren't invited down there. And that was after, I think, the first day that they filmed the show, someone from the network came down and made the mistake of commenting on how Harriet should change her hair. And from that point on, Ozzie closed the set to industry folks. The public, actually, he let in. But if you actually were on the other side of the desk, not so much. And I was wondering where that was really coming from, because there's always been kind of a karma with the Nelson family that I've always found fascinating. And I've been doing a little bit of research, and I've only scratched the surface of it, and I don't know how much credence I should put in it. I only know from what I've discovered and what I've been told. Which, I wondered, why is it that Ozzie Nelson, one of only two people to own his own show, other than Desi Arnaz, because he walked into Hollywood meetings with no one knowing that he actually had a law degree from Rutgers. Ozzie was really, really smart. And he was able to negotiate the contract for the family, and now the family owns the family television show.
Wow,
very, very,
brilliant.
very rare, So, but I wonder why it was that you can have a guy like Ozzie Nelson, who had the longest running live action sitcom in television history at 14 and a half years, 435 episodes. He pioneered 6 camera techniques that we use every single day. The over-the-shoulder shot, that was Ozzie's. I mean, so many pioneering moves, not a single Emmy.
Not even a lifetime achievement.
Not a thing. Not a thing. Ricky Nelson sold 500 million singles, was responsible for smuggling rock and roll into mainstream American living rooms, right? One of the founding fathers of country rock.
Yeah.
That whole sound. Not a single Grammy.
Not a lifetime achievement,
Nope,
right?
Not a thing.
And also, like we mentioned on the last time we talked, didn't get into the Hall of Fame the first time through, and should have.
Got in the Hall of Fame the second year. He was actually alive when he watched his friends being inducted that first year. And I was there when he was watching the induction ceremony, and he was really gracious. He was a really nice guy. So I asked him, what do you feel about that, Pop? Because I thought it was a slight.
Yeah.
I learned the politics years later about why that was. He was inducted the second year, and it really was not cool. But, he was happy for his friends. He really was. But I could tell that it was, kind of a little bit of a dig. Because I've always said, our dad was the most down-to-earth, sweetest, humble guy. He deserves so much more recognition than he got. And I know it's normal for a son to deify his deceased father. I get that. That aside, the thing that makes me the most proud of my pop, more so than the plaques on the wall and all that kind of stuff and the music, is, all the time I meet people who say, I got a chance to talk to your dad. I ran into him at a grocery store here on this particular day, and I was 26, and I was really struggling to find myself, and I struck up a conversation with him, and he took an hour for me. He made me feel better about my path, and he was just such a great guy. Those are the stories that I love.
And you're not alone in that. Since we posted the video together, about a week before, I posted a video about your father, and all the comments were that you tell them that I met their dad in this town, in this place, and he spent like 30 minutes talking to me. Nicest guy I ever met. Countless stories of that. That is
the coolest. To me, that's the legacy that I'm the most proud of. I mean, he was a genuinely good guy who loved people. He really did. And that, to me, I know it's a cold comfort that there's not that recognition that really should be there, that I do believe. But, you got to think, okay, so hang on a second. This can't be an accident, all right? You think if you go back, you go back there. There are a lot of people in the entertainment industry that have done far less And why is it that some people seem to get all the awards and all the recognition and all the breaks and all that stuff, and other people just really have to struggle?
Yeah.
You know, and I understand, you know, it's been told to me by some friends in the music business, you know, it's not a talent show. And it's true. This is not a talent competition. I get it. There's a lot of evidence to that being the fact. But why is it that some entertainers seem to get all the great movie roles and all the great licenses in the great movies?
Or 50-year careers.
Right. And then some people just have a really hard time. Now, what I heard, and I don't know if there's any truth to the after effects of this, but my grandpa Ozzy went to Rutgers, and you know, during the process of going to Rutgers, he was actually offered membership in the Skull and Bones, and he turned it down. And you know, he just
Lots
said,
of presidents were in the Skull and Bones, correct?
Yeah, and I don't profess to know the goings on behind closed doors with the Skull and Bones, but I do know that it's not just a society with secrets, it's a secret society, and there are a lot of members of the Skull and Bones that are powerful politicians later on in life, or heads of industry.
Almost have to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they weren't when they were actually jumped in, so to speak, their lives were blessed after. And I don't know, you know, how, if membership had anything to do with their charmed lives afterwards or not. All I know is, from that point on, Ozzy had to work really, 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 really hard. Like, the doors didn't just fly open for him. So, you know, we Nelsons have always had to do things kind of like, it's like guerrilla warfare. We've had to do things from the thickets and stuff, and we never were really welcomed through the front door, which is ironic to say, but it's true. You know, we've had to be innovative and do things differently.
Well, that's why I was kind of surprised, or I was kind of curious, because, you know, not to totally flatter you, but, you know, when you guys put out your first records, like, you and Matthew are very good-looking guys, especially for that time. It's like,
well, at least Matthew is, but
you seem like, you know, slam dunk for a record label, like easy promotion, great songs, all this stuff. So it's, you know, to hear that you guys had to struggle, that's also why I wonder. It's like, why is this? Like, was there a point where you guys were maybe told, like, hey, this is the way we want you to do things, and you basically realize, like, it's either do it their way or do it our way and live with it?
Well, you would think that it would have been easy, and it's really not no one's business. So we're entertainers. Our job is to make people forget about all of that stuff. Do I think that there's a sordid underbelly to Hollywood and the entertainment business and the music business and all that? We kind of touched on that last time we talked. It's absolutely real. It's been around forever. I mean, you can feel, a lot of people go to Hollywood and they go, oh, it's Tinseltown, glitz and glamour, everyone's glamorous and famous, and isn't this beautiful? I always resonated where I felt the desperation, I felt the broken dreams, I felt all when I was living in Hollywood. You know, I put it in perspective and stuff, but even coming from the family that I came from, that's what I felt. I've always been sensitive to that, you know. So, you know, Matt and I always felt very different from most folks, but not because we came from the family we came from or felt we were better than or anything like that. It had nothing to do with that. It's just we were never really attracted to the kind of dark edge that a lot of our contemporaries were. Like, when Nelson first came out, I guess it was 1990, something like that, so many of the other bands that were happening, well, I guess the Sunset Strip scene was happening at that time. Yeah.
Well, no, it's very competitive. That's kind of why I was wondering.
Well, we were never a part of that. You know, it's important to note. You know, I was reminded of that today. A friend of mine sent me a couple of YouTube videos from a band that was a really big deal on the Sunset Strip back in the day, and I don't need to name them, nor would I, because they never did anything. They imploded, which a lot of bands, most bands do. But, I mean, they were a big deal on the Sunset Strip at the time. And Matt and I, we were actually, during that whole time period, we were in the studio writing songs. We went back to the drawing board after our father died. We realized that, you know, all of those bands that we saw that were now playing on the Sunset Strip, with some notable exceptions who wound up being, you know, the Motley Crues of the world and stuff.
Yeah, Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. Most of the bands had no songs. You know, they were concentrating on all the stuff that didn't matter.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, their image and how many girls they got to go to their shows and all that stuff. And that's all fine. But what I realized, like most of those bands, if they were lucky, they had one song in their set that all the girls would freak out to, they'd wait the entire show for that one song that they loved. And most of the bands on the Sunset Strip were like that. You know, they had maybe like half of a song that was like kind of good, you know? And we always figured that the way to actually get yourself out of that and stay out of that world is to write great songs. So that was always the focus. And when our father died, even though we'd been playing the LA club scene for a decade, we realized that our songs were not strong enough. If they were strong enough, then we would have gotten that elusive record deal. We would have made things happen. And so we went back to the drawing board with Mark Tanner, who was a songwriter that our friend Tom Vickers turned us on to. We sat down in Tom Vickers' office, his publishing office, and listened to hundreds of songs by his writers. And we were making notes as we would go by. We hear like a verse and a chorus and stuff like that, and then move on. And we put a check mark by each one that we liked, and it turned out that like 9 of the 10 check marks had one writer in common, and that was Mark Tanner. They were all co-writes, but Mark Tanner, his name kept on coming up. So we thought that actually might be a good fit. And then we met Mark and started writing for the first Nelson record and doing something different. We always wanted to do something that was different from what everybody else was doing. Like most of the other bands, like your Guns N' Roses, they came from a really strong blues background.
Yeah.
1-4-5 blues, that was their thing. And it's very easy to make a song sound rock and roll when you're coming from the blues. It sounds mean, it sounds tough, minor keyed, awesome. But Matt and I really grew up in that whole Hollywood Hills thing with our dad's Stone Canyon band, and you know the people like David Crosby or Linda Ronstadt or Jackson Browne, Joni Mitchell coming over to the house. And so that was the world that we grew up in. We grew up with that whole Hollywood Hills troubadour, country rock, folk thing.
Yeah.
That's where we came from. So all of our stuff was not coming from the blues at all. It wasn't derived from that. That's why Love and Affection has an electric 12-string on the beginning of it, and it's major keyed, and I mean, I think it still kicks and all that stuff, but we had a very unique, not only sound, but philosophy. Our philosophy was different from all of those guys. The other guys were playing on the Sunset Strip, and you know, they had skulls on stage and candelabras and, you know, pentagrams and all that kind of stuff. That just never really resonated with me and Matt.
Had you shopped yourself, you guys as a band, before this and not had any success, or?
We actually got turned down, and I'm proud to say, by every label in Los Angeles and in New York twice. We made the rounds twice.
Did you ever feel that once they had rejected you, they weren't open to hearing anything else that you did? You know, like when you came back with this new Nelson?
Well, it's kind of a blessing and a curse of having a job at a record company as an executive, because back in that day, I mean, you'd be lucky if an A&R guy lasted more than 6 months.
Oh,
you know, because if you think about it, like, I mean, one signing that they put their stamp on that didn't work out, they were fired. That's why when Matt and I got smart about the whole thing, we focused on John David Kolodner. And John Kolodner was a legendary A&R guy at Geffen Records, and he was responsible for originally signing like AC/DC for Echo, and he put Aerosmith back together.
That's what I thought, right?
You know, he was Whitesnake, putting the Whitesnake record together, all that. He was
the magic touch.
Yeah, he was great. He's the guy in the Dude Looks Like a Lady video that turns around in the wedding dress
with the beard.
That's a real guy, right? Yeah. And we focused on John, and we courted him because he had a long-term contract at Geffen. He was a legend. And Geffen was very smart with the way he did it. He had 3 superstar A&R guys who took 3/4 of the building, okay? And they were all in competition with each other. That was designed. So you had Gary Gersh, John Kolodner, and Tom Zutaut.
Right.
And they signed very different acts, okay? Like Kolodner, in addition to Peter Gabriel and Berlin, he had Cher, Nelson. He had more of that pop thing that he could hear, right? Tom Zutaut, of course.
GNR,
yeah. Guns N' Roses, and that was the 800-pound gorilla at the time, right?
Probably if you have a GNR, you can have a couple of flops afterward.
I guess. I mean, that's what they tell all the acts when they come in. When you go, hey, wait a second, I'm reading my contract. What do you mean I only get 4% of every dollar that comes in? It's like, well, for every act that, like, if you guys make it, for every act like you that makes it, we've got another 20 that fail. And it's like, well, try going into Goodyear and selling them your new tire and all that stuff, and they're not going to accept, well, just because you've made dumb business decisions with other tire designs, you're not going to pay me for mine. That doesn't make any sense, you know? But they got away with that forever, and the industry has completely changed now. But back then, there was a particular formula that most people followed. Okay, you built your following in clubs, created a buzz, attracted an A&R guy to come down, catch your show. He signs you, you make a record, you make a video, you're a star on MTV, and then you tour arenas. That's what everybody thought the magic formula was. And to a certain extent, for a lot of people, when it did work out, that was the formula they followed. For me and Matt, it didn't really work out that way. It wasn't going to happen. Contrary to what most people think, having the last name Nelson, for most A&R people in most record companies, before we started working with John Kolodner, these people were insecure at best, okay? Like I said, if they were lucky, they'd last maybe a year, you know? But we knew that it was going to take some time to develop. So if we were to sign with any normal A&R guy at any label, chances are by the time we got to go into the studio and it was really together, chances are that A&R guy was not going to be there anymore.
Right, and hence probably the guy that was your #1 fan supporting your band.
He's gone. So and then the new guy coming in, or new girl, they don't want to inherit their father's Oldsmobile. They want their new stuff. They want to clear the decks. So that's the problem. That's what we found. So, you know, we did make the rounds in LA, and we had a great attorney at the time, in New York 2 times, with a whole new series of demos and everything. And we couldn't get anybody to believe enough in us to put their name behind it, because it would have been a high profile signing. So it's a blessing and a curse. Like, there were enough acts that were sons or daughters of, up until that point, that had been colossal failures.
Yeah.
And it ended the record career of a number of executives. So no one was going to actually put their neck on the block for us. Yeah. And we knew that, just like we knew that none of the hot songwriters, the Diane Warrens of the world, weren't going to give us their top shelf material.
Yeah.
Those songs were on hold for Aerosmith. They weren't going to do that. So we actually found ourselves in a great position where we realized if we wanted great songs, we were going to have to write them ourselves. No one was going to come along and give us these great songs and make our career. There was no magic manager that was going to come along and go, I'm going to make you guys stars. You know, none of that was going to happen. That was just our karma. It was always going to be like that. Like, if you look now, you will never be able to find a single picture of the label executives taking that magic, you know, that Hollywood reporter signature, you know, they're signing their contract to the desk. You won't find one for Nelson. It doesn't exist, because they wanted culpable deniability. If it didn't work, they wanted to be able to say, I never believed in it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's the industry, man. Success has many parents, and failure is an orphan. That's always been the case with me and Matt. But it's always been kind of weird too. Even more so than that, we've always kind of been considered guilty until proven innocent. And I don't know what that karma is all about, and I really don't care, because I'm so used to it right now. It just makes me work harder, which is fine. But we're as far from entitled as a person can be, because we always just kind of always assume we're going to have to be, kind of waging our career war, utilizing guerrilla warfare from the thickets, and coming down and doing our little raids and then retreating and we're going to have to do that, because we were never going to get, let's say back in the day, what a band like Warrant got, which is full support from a label, a great management company out of the box, these wonderful tours to go on.
Yeah, like opening for like the Stones, or built-in audience.
We never got that. As a matter of fact, when we had the #1 album in the country at the time, and no band would take us on the road with them. They just wouldn't. We got turned down by everybody because they didn't think it was real. They thought it was fabricated. Because if you think of those videos were, really
well done.
But constructed. You know, they looked like art pieces for a reason, because we wanted people.
From what you wore to what you played, everything was very stylish.
But Matt and I were behind this. There was no record company that was doing that. That was me and Matt. And the reason why we did it is because we figured that, okay, the number one radio station and tastemaker in the world at the time was MTV. And we figured, okay, there's a kid there in Des Moines, Iowa, right after school, and they're unwinding, and they're zipping through MTV and the TV channels in general. And if you're lucky, you got a second and a half, maybe, to capture someone's attention to where they're going to park it to go, oh, what's this?
Yeah.
So when everybody else was making these black and white, spill beer on your girlfriend, taking themselves too seriously videos, we went the opposite way. We wanted to do Technicolor. We wanted to have, in the first video, snow is falling up, birds are flying backwards, we're jumping around. It's intentionally a lot. We did that for a reason, because our motto was, love us or hate us, you're going to know who we are.
How was it received by MTV?
Actually, pretty well, you know, and the reason for that, it wasn't Nelson was never an industry-made success. You know, don't get me wrong, I'm really grateful for a great team, especially at radio, that helped us out. Our man Lauren Cornelius in the Midwest, I mean, he was responsible for 80% of all the Nelson records sold, because he got who our fans were. You know, that happened to be his territory, and he loved us and he loved the band. So that helps you. You just need, no matter what you do, who you are, you just need one champion.
Yeah.
You know, you're one yes away from a completely different life, so don't give up. And and I got to thank all those people. I'm not saying that we did this on our own, but I am saying starting it out, here's an example of the whole guerrilla warfare thing. We actually were not the priority band on DGC. David Geffen started a side label, our second label called DGC. It was the one that wound up signing Nirvana, you know, 3/4 of a year into the establishment of the label. And I got a call from Mr. Geffen personally, which never happens. It's like, you know, hello God, you know. And he called up and he said, Gunnar, I've decided I'm going to move you over to a new label I'm starting called DGC. And I said, Mr. Geffen, with all respect, Geffen Records, as far as an independent label is concerned, is the most respected label in the world. We really wanted to be on Geffen for a reason.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't think you're hearing me correctly. I'm not asking you to go on this label. I'm telling you that I'm putting you on this label, and I just poached the best radio guys from every label in the country to staff this. My name is on it. I'm all about
His
ego.
full name.
He said, I'm in the David Geffen business. I will not allow this to fail. You want to be there. I was like, oh, they put it that way. Okay, sir, thank you very much. But we weren't the priority band. At every label, every quarter they have a marketing meeting. They sit down, they go, okay, of all the roster that we've got, who do we have with records that are supposed to come out? Who are we going to prioritize? We're going to release 10 records this quarter, but we're going to put all the money and all the phone calls and all the radio favors behind one. And we're going to focus on them for 3 months. And if they don't happen, on to the next one, right? Now, Nelson, we never were the priority band. There was a band called Little Caesar, and Little Caesar was the first act that got priority on DGC. And they did Chain of Fools, they did a cover song, and it was really good, but it was more of what was happening. You know, lots of tattoos everywhere, and you know, all that stuff, and you know, blues-based song, obviously, and all that. And so we didn't get the nod. And during that time, Matthew and I got a phone call from our manager who said, hey, I have a friend that works at MTV. Daisy Fuentes, their DJ, their top DJ, is going on vacation. They wanted somebody to sit in for her for the week. Would you and your brother, you know, I put you up for that.
That's insane. That's a huge gig.
It is, but it's also kind of terrifying because they didn't know if we could carry a video show. We'd never done anything before.
Well, I'm surprised they did a full week. Usually, like now, they would say, okay, like this person one day, this person one day, just in case they suck.
Right. So Matt and I flew to New York, and we did Dial MTV and the Countdown show for an entire week, sitting in for Daisy Fuentes. We didn't have any records in stores. Nothing had been released yet or anything. But what Matt and I did I mean, we spent some time in England, and they've got something there called the tall poppy syndrome, which is if you get a little too high in the field like they do in poppy fields, they'll come and they'll top you, right? So we learned how to be self-effacing when we went to England. British humor is very self-effacing. You know, you go there and stuff like that, they'll rip on themselves first before you even have a chance to do it. And we learned that skill. So, you know, Matthew and I were in on the joke. I know that our image was a lot. We knew that it was a lot. It was on purpose. And so we lampooned each other and ourselves. And
also, you're identifiable after that.
right. Well, the image was pretty darn strong, but we also were smart enough to bring our acoustic guitars with us and play in and out of commercial breaks.
Oh.
And there had not been an MTV Unplugged yet. No one was doing that. Matt and I had to do that because the year before the Milli Vanilli scandal had happened. So, all right, so they'd just gotten their Grammys pulled, and everybody was hyper aware of things being fraudulent. So, you know, Matthew and I come along the scene, and we look like Milli Vanilla, and we have to overcome that. And the best way for us to do that, like we did at all the radio stations all over the country, we show up with a couple of acoustic guitars and our voices live. Wow. You can't hide behind it.
I didn't even think of that though. How like when you're in a 2-person band,
yeah.
right after that's happened, it's like you really did kind of resemble that.
The timing was unfortunate.
Yeah.
You know, so to overcome that, we brought our acoustic guitars with us and we sang in and out of commercial breaks on MTV. That's what did it.
Wow.
It wasn't the label. It wasn't the industry. We, you know, kind of waged a little guerrilla attack, and we went in there and we did it, and we retreated, and the fans are who spoke. When we got back home, everything had changed.
So how long after that did your album come out?
Well, they had a single was going to radio the Monday after we stopped. We ended on... Okay, so, actually, excuse me. The single dropped on Tuesday. We started filming on Monday. And why the supplies is because the single dropped on Tuesday, and we were doing the daily countdown show. And the last show that we filmed was for the Friday going into the weekend. And you know, you count down through all the videos and stuff. And they don't really reveal. You got your cue cards and all that kind of stuff. And the coolest thing was, they said they waited until the very last minute, and they said, okay, and now you get to read the #1 most requested video and song and stuff. So they held up the cue cards. And I had the pleasure of reading our names off. It was Nelson's Love and Affection. It was very cool. It was a great moment. And I can't tell you what a difference it was, because by the time we got back to LA, we had our first signing thing that we did in a local record store when there was such a thing. They had the Sherman Oaks Galleria, which was my local mall when I was a teenager, which was really surreal. And they had a Sam Goody or a Licorice Pizza in there or something like that. And that was the only difference, man. The Friday before I went out to New York, Matt and I showed up at that mall. We bought our socks and underwear for the trip, and no one noticed us and no one cared. And then 1 week later, we come back for the autograph signing thing, and they had to close down the mall. The mall, it was a riot.
That's so cool.
But the only difference was the stint on MTV. That's it. That's it. We were the same guys. You know, we had released the same single to radio and all stuff, but it was the power of television that changed things overnight. And it was something that the record company didn't set up. So no matter what it is you do and what you've chosen to do, you know, you jump on all of your opportunities, you know, when you can get them. I mean, you don't know when, you know, activity leads to activity. You don't know when one thing is going to lead to another, or one person you meet is going to have a friend that's going to introduce you to this person. You just have to be open to it as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And we were able to take advantage of that whole thing and realize, okay, yeah, we're telegenic. And we rip on each other, and when it comes down to it, clearly we don't take ourselves seriously, but we take the music seriously. Yeah. And that was disarming to a lot of haters, but still you're always going to have some. But we found that a lot of those people were just people who didn't get it and didn't understand it. And with the benefit of 3 decades since, there are a lot of people who were very jaded, a lot of musicologists and critics that were very jaded back in the day. And they have come around now and gone, you know, I've given this stuff a fresh listen, and this stuff was really competent pop music.
Yeah.
I mean, like really ahead of its time. I'm proud to say it was the first time since Tambourine Man that there was an electric 12-string and a #1.
That's
so
cool.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's something that we had always wanted to do growing up in LA, playing the LA clubs professionally from the time we were 12, trying to get that elusive record deal. But realizing very quickly, for whatever reason, our karma was very different from everybody else that was trying to get that same slot. And it was harder on us because people, for some reason, you know, they were convinced that we were trust fund kids, that we didn't need the break, that it was a hobby to us, and all that, which is as far from true as as could be.
Right.
That we talked about that before. I mean, our situation was pretty dire when our dad died, you know?
Yeah, well, you told me last time we were hanging out that you and Matthew used to attend like a summer camp. And somebody commented and said, I was their counselor. They were the nicest kids, and I remember Gunnar having his drum set at the camp. So you were actually like so attached to your music that you were taking it to camps with you, which I think is pretty cool.
I know. Why couldn't I have played kazoo or harmonica? I had to play drums, of course. But yeah, no, I just couldn't at that particular point. Even as a kid, I couldn't imagine an entire summer without being able to play.
Let me ask you, you know, you said that you guys went and got the law changed so that you were, when you were 12 years old, that you could be escorted in and perform at the clubs. I'm surprised, being that age, that someone didn't try and take advantage of that gimmick and try and sign you and do something as like if you remember Hanson, you know, where it's like you take advantage of people that can perform that are young and good looking. If that would have happened, how do you think your career would have been different? I mean, can you imagine it everlasting?
Well, you know, it really depends, because like in Hanson's case, they're a bunch of talented grown men now, and they were a bunch of talented kids, but they didn't have a family name to actually crawl out from under as well.
Right.
So they just had the one gimmick, which was they were super talented kids, right? You know, we would have had, you know, multiple gimmicks, right? And we never wanted to be a gimmick.
Probably not your own songs, I would guess, at that point.
Probably at that particular point, yeah. I mean, I'm sure when I was starting out, I was wondering, now why is it that there are so many of these people out there that get given songs and they can get, you know, right to making music and doing all that stuff? You know, we just never wanted to be the Monkees. As a matter of fact, Michael Nesmith never wanted to be a monkey either.
Yeah.
But he was a real writer.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying there wasn't real talent there, but you know, it's like my father's words of advice. I mean, I always took it seriously about being a writer, because we grew up during that second phase of his career, being around us when he was writing songs like Garden Party, when people thought he was completely over.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a real blessing to us, because we saw the good times. We also saw the crushing bad times. We saw both. We saw when the money ran out from the 50s hits and all that kind of stuff, and had a very expensive wife and our mother. You know, she was spending way more money than he could afford to cover.
Yeah.
Another story for another time, but it's a juicy one. You know, we also saw, you know, what happened to him when the phone stopped ringing.
Yeah.
When people stopped taking his calls.
But you never know if that's your only opportunity in life, when, you know, when something like, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, you know, starting that young, and now you go to the Sunset Strip, there's like nothing going on at night.
Right.
But in 2000, when I moved there, they were, you know, they had cops up there because there was so much traffic. And I hear before that, it's like you couldn't even walk up and down Sunset during the 70s, 80s, because this music scene was so poppin'. I would think that the trends were just constantly changing. Being a band that started in the scene at the age of 12, did you ever feel the need to like be changing your style to fit in with what was going on the scene? Well,
we always played the music that we wanted to play and the style that we wanted to play, but you know, a lot of people mistakenly identify us with that whole Sunset Strip scene, the hair band thing.
Yeah.
Right? The only thing we had in common was hair. That really, seriously, that was it. And it was also an easy way to market us at the time, because we were signed to Geffen, as I mentioned, with bands like Guns N' Roses and such on that label, and the Sunset Strip scene happening. Everyone was living on a prayer. All that stuff was going on.
That was a dark scene, too, it seemed like.
It was. Well, fortunately for
drugs and...
Fortunately for us, we weren't a part of that scene. That's what I was going to say. That whole Sunset Strip hairband thing, Matt and I missed that. Matt and I started out 10 years earlier. So when we were playing the club scene, 12, 13, 14 years old, it was during the Skinny Tie Band era. That's when we were sharing the stage with the Police, the Knack, the Go-Go's, Bangles, everything with a "the" in front of the name, you know, X. You know, you had two scenes that were going on at the same time. You had, it's like the Sharks and the Jets. You had the New Wavers, and you had the Punkers. And Matt and I were friends with everybody. You know, we had great punk friends and all that stuff, and we had great New Waver friends and stuff. And really, Matt and I had kind of a synthesis going on of kind of both. You know, we had the energy of punk, and we were trying to do the writing, the pop writing like the Ramones did. The Ramones had a
Yeah.
great balance of that. And by the way, they never came from the blues either. Talk to Johnny about that. His whole thing was like, I was listening to the Shirelles. I was
Yeah.
listening to Ricky Nelson, you know, and that's the stuff that they love. So when you listen to the Ramones, who kick ass, of course,
Yeah.
listen to their
Super
tunes.
catchy.
Super catchy. None of it is blues.
Yeah.
And so that's what Matthew and I really loved. And I love me some blues, but come on, man, no one's gonna imagine that I grew up on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
It just wasn't authentic to my experience, right? So, you know, we actually got to miss the certain excesses of the hairband era on the Sunset Strip. But what people don't know is like all of those guys that we had as our contemporaries, our competition, when we were kids on those same stages, when you're playing, like the big dog at the time was Madame Wong's West. That was like the seat of the punk movement.
Yeah.
And it was Michelle Meyer, the booker there, who really saw something in me and Matt as 12-year-old kids, and she was the one that took us under her wing. She was the one that helped us petition Town Hall or City Hall to get the law changed to where we could come in and play. And you know, I was really blessed. I got a chance to master and write the liner notes for Nelson's Greatest Hits record last week.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we just did a deal with Universal, and it's the first time you get the entire catalog, the 2 records that Geffen owned and the 15 that Stone Canyon Records owned.
Yeah.
And we got to pick the best from all of that and make a Greatest Hits record, which I know sounds pretentious, but it's called Greatest Hits and Near Misses.
If you have enough hits to have a Greatest Hits record, there's nothing to be embarrassed or
It's such a blessing, man. It really
Yeah.
is. And I was sitting there just kind
nothing
of
wrong
caught.
with accomplishments, you know?
But I was caught in that moment where I'm sitting there going, look, I'm just a kid from Burbank who loved music more than anything, who just wanted to be like his dad and his dad's friends and make music. I just thought music was the greatest thing in the world, and I still do.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many ways we could all make a living far easier than doing this. You know, we have to deal with not only, you know, singing sick and broken relationships and all the temptations.
Life
and,
on the road.
all of that stuff, but, you know, 99% of your fans are absolutely awesome, and 1% are the ones that, you know, show up at your house and take pictures of your kids.
Yeah.
You know, and you have these moments where you go, should I be doing this, right? And I could be doing something else.
Yeah, but the way that you touch people.
But that's the thing that
It's
comes to me.
amazing,
It's
you
like,
know?
look, man, if I just didn't love music so damn much, you know,
Yeah.
and if I didn't love being in the connection business as much as I do, I would think about it. But I never had those moments, is what I was going to say. I've never woken up even on my darkest day in this business, and this is a crappy business, where I've gone, I'd rather do something else. I've never felt that way because it's like breathing to me. I love
Right.
writing and singing and playing, and everything that it costs me to do that is worth it to me.
Right.
At least as I sit here now. I don't know 10 years from now if I'm going to feel that way, but I felt that way my entire life. You know, my first conscious memory was seeing my dad playing, and I was sitting on an apple crate on the side of the stage at Knott's Berry Farm, and I made this connection like, he's having a great time, they're loving it, I see all this love going
Yeah.
back and forth, I want to do that.